Hello.
Hello there.
Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone who is watching on AirMeet or LinkedIn or wherever you're joining us from. Super excited to be here with you today. Want to make sure we do introductions. I'll let you go first. Obviously, your name is Chris, but tell us a little bit about like what you're doing for work and also just a little bit about you personally.
Oh, about me personally, that's a whole other like can of worms. I don't know if I want to open, but from a work perspective, so I am the director of business development at Replicate. So we are a contact center automation AI platform, and we lost you for a second there, didn't we? You're
I'm
back.
not sure what my microphone is doing, but it's some nonsense. I think it's fine now.
Perfect. Well, you're back, so I'll keep rambling. But I've been at Replicant for I don't know 6 weeks now, 8 weeks, something like that. Had been at Visier before that. Had been kind of around the block. I have sold as an account executive. I've been kind of a BDR. I don't think we called it that at the time, but I kind of been through all of the paces and the world of sales. And for me, part of the reason I love this job is I love coaching junior sales folks. Love helping them sort out what they want to do in their career because Lord knows I had no idea when I started my sales career.
Yeah,
So that's a
me
big part of
neither.
what yeah, right. You're like, hey, I guess I could do this. I don't really know what else I want to do with my life. And next thing you know, you have a career in this thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's kind of where I like to think my specialty is really just helping folks kind of figure out what they want to do and help them get the tools to kind of get there. So I guess that's me in a nutshell from a professional perspective. On the personal side of things, I live in Montreal, Canada. It is cold. It is snowy. I just got married in October, so that's some exciting stuff. Thank you, thank you. So yeah, had that going on. I love to cook. I love to eat. I blame my Italian ancestors for that one. And based on the love of eating and cooking, I also have slowly developed the love of working out to try and counteract the two.
Yeah,
Um,
gotta have a
so yeah,
balance.
try and find that balance in there somewhere, right?
Well, that's
So
awesome.
yeah,
Well,
that's
congrats on the wedding for sure.
thank you so much.
Um, yeah, just a little bit about me for anyone who may not have seen me on a live stream before. My name is Adriana. I work at RevGenius, which is basically a online community. It's totally free if you want to join for sales, marketing, RevOps, and success professionals. We do a bunch of these free events and everything every week. I have 3 dogs. I am in Texas right now, living here. It is like 70 degrees outside, thank God, because I cannot deal with the snow. But yeah, super excited to kind of dive into the SDR job search. I only broke into tech as an SDR like about a year ago, so I definitely don't have like as much leadership experience, but I've been through the job search a few times since then. So definitely excited to like get your perspective from someone who like has hired a lot of business development reps and sales development reps. First very hot topic is layoffs. Actually, I forgot to mention if you guys have any questions that you want Chris to answer during the session, please put them in the chat and we will do our best to get to every single one of them. But let's start with the layoff mess that has been going
Or
on.
any questions you want Adriana to answer. I mean, it's not a one man show here. Throw them in.
For sure.
So we're talking layoffs.
Yeah. I mean, one, just like what has been going on in general. I know kind of on everyone's LinkedIn feed, it's pretty full of layoff posts. Like, is this the worst time in the entire universe to be job searching? Because I know that that's like how a lot of people feel, especially if you are looking for those like entry level roles.
I the last time I saw this personally was kind of I would say like 2020 COVID-ish is just starting to happen. People aren't sure what's going on, and a lot of folks were being laid off. A lot of companies were kind of readjusting to what was going on. I think the difference for me between now and then is, don't get me wrong, I see comments about layoffs far too often in my feed, but I'm also
Mhm.
seeing a lot of folks starting new roles. There are
Yeah.
still jobs out there. There is still a lot going on. I definitely think it's more challenging to be looking for a job. I think it's more noisy right now. I also think that between now and the end of the year, a lot is going to change. And I want to cross my fingers that it's going to change for the positive. But I think right
Mhm.
now, a lot of companies are trying to figure out kind of what to do, what is the right approach. Are we kind of moving towards a recession? Do I maybe make some moves beforehand to make sure I'm not in a dire situation later? Like, I don't think there's this defined, hey, we like just mass layoffs everywhere. I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
it going on. I think some of it's a response from, some cash injections that happened over the last couple of years when money was easy to get a hold of. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors going on right now, but it might still be a little bit early to say like, hey, things are going sideways.
Gotcha. So overall, people shouldn't be too scared of what's been going on because, like you said, like there are a lot of job openings. There are still a lot of people getting roles. It's just kind of a little bit of a trickier environment.
Yeah, I like when you're talking careers, I hate to go and say like it's doom and gloom, watch out. I think that there are, definitely some folks who, need to be making that jump. Like heck, I made a move, 2, 3 months ago at this point,
Mhm.
whatever it was. But that was in the back of my mind, like, hey, where I was when I was at Vizier, like we're in a good spot, we're financially stable. I'm pretty comfortable here doing what I think is a nice job. Is
Mhm.
it worth taking that risk and going somewhere else? So I think that's something you absolutely have to look at if you're in a position where you're currently in a role. And yeah, if you're not, then you have to find a way to differentiate yourself from all of your peers that maybe have been laid off in the recent past as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about if someone has just gotten laid off from an SDR role, especially if they have under a year of experience. I think it can be really scary for people to be, looking at these job descriptions and thinking like, oh my gosh, like I haven't been here very long. No one's going to want to hire me. Like, what can you tell them? Just in terms of like, what can they do to like deal with this layoff? Where should they get started?
Sure. Let me start with the optimistic lens. Here's my thought. I truly believe in this and have since the first day I got into sales like 10 plus years ago. You don't need experience to be a good salesperson. You really don't. And having less than a year, sure, that's a bit scary because on paper maybe does not look exactly the way you would have hoped. But at the end of the day, I think where you look is just as important as how much experience you have. So like look, if you got laid off recently, the first thing I would say is like if you can, and I realize some folks are in different situations, but like take a second to kind of dust yourself off. I've been in the room with folks who have been laid off or have their employment ended, and like it's a lot. Heck, it's a lot from somebody who's observing almost from the outside. So if
Mhm.
you're in that spot, like take a second, dust yourself off, get your head straight, take a minute.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really, really important to try and just get your head on straight and then come up with a strategy about how you want to approach things. And the way I always look at it, and I've seen the change even working at Replicant that's, about 4 years old or about 150 employees versus Vizier that was 500 employees and had been around for almost 10 years. That
Mhm.
maturity plays a big factor in what type of BDR we want to hire. At Vizier, I had the infrastructure. I could go pretty junior. I could go with somebody who didn't really have experience. And we had the training, we had the development, we had the enablement teams in place to get people up and running. Somebody who's super junior applying to Replicant, it's probably going to be a little bit tougher. We're just not from a
Yeah.
structure perspective there to be able to get people, into a spot where they're going to be successful. And I don't want to bring anybody on board that may then eventually fail. So I want to make sure that they do have that structure that they need. So the less experience you have, in my mind, you kind of have to aim a little bit bigger in the way the type of the company you're looking at. Because I think they're going to be more adept to hiring somebody who maybe has a bit
Mhm.
less experience because they know, hey, we're going to put them through school. Like they're going to
Yeah.
get their training and development and they're going to be good to go. So I think that's something to keep in mind when you are looking. Figure out where you fit in the grand scheme of things and go somewhere that's going to give you the experience. Nobody says you have to be there forever, but go get that year, go get that training under your belt, and then start looking if you're passionate about startups or a specific
Mhm.
industry. You can still make that pivot later on.
Gotcha. That definitely makes a lot of sense. I know I started at not a super tiny startup, but definitely it was like around 150 people when I joined. And I did kind of have that experience of like not really having that onboarding or anything. And if I could like go back in time, I don't think I would have made that same decision. It was definitely like pretty overwhelming. So I appreciate that you said that. But awesome. So, okay. So if someone has recently been laid off, like how can they approach that on like their resume, on their LinkedIn? Like what kinds of things? Basically, I know a lot of applicants can be concerned that, like, if they were recently laid off, that it might look like a red flag to a hiring manager, to an employer. So, like, how can they kind of get ahead of that?
I think that's a great point. I think that ironically, the layoff timing right now kind of plays in your favor. I know it sounds a bit silly, but if you put that you were laid off around now, people are going to question it a whole lot less than if you were laid off randomly in the middle of I don't know when. Just like if I see, an employment end in March 2020, like I hate to keep talking about the pandemic, but if I see that happening, I'm probably not judging them all too hard.
Mhm.
Um, I would own it as much as possible, be upfront about it. Hey, here's what happened. Like economic downturn, this happened. I actually had somebody I have interviewed for a job at Replicant, and we're going through the process still a little bit, but like she had been referred by her previous manager, who then gave a glowing reference. So it's like, hey,
Mhm.
I know you were
Yeah.
laid off. You got the references to back it up to say that, hey, you were a performer and this is just the reality of what happened. So if you can do something like that, you're in great shape. So I wouldn't hesitate putting it on LinkedIn. Like, I've seen LinkedIn rally around a ton of folks recently who have been laid off and helping lift them
Mhm.
up and find them other opportunities. So like I would own it. I would be transparent. I would try and get back in touch with whoever your leader is in the role you were laid off from and see if you can get a reference, see if you can get some referrals. Maybe they're, networked in this space. But
Yeah.
if you try and dodge it or try and tell a story around it and you get kind of found out, whether or not it's a bad situation, it always kind of comes off a little bit sideways when I haven't started working with you and I'm already getting curveballs.
Yeah.
Makes me think like, hey, is this going to happen when you come on board as well? So that's just my thought process behind it.
Yeah, for sure. So I know that you had kind of already mentioned earlier market saturation. Like there are a lot of people who want to break into tech. There are a lot of people who've been laid off. There are a lot of people, just looking for jobs in general. So how do you compete? Like just in a crowded marketplace in general, when other people have more experience than you, like where do you start trying to stand out?
You've got to get noticed. And I know it sounds silly, but you've got to find a way to separate yourself. And there's a wide variety of ways to do it. Um, anybody who's listening right now, start posting on LinkedIn. Do it now. Start yesterday. Like there's no better way than if I can go
Mhm.
on and see that, hey, you've been engaging through LinkedIn with a variety of
Yeah.
people and you've got a bit of a network built up. Like I'm going to notice that. I think that's something that's really important right now, especially the social selling aspect. So that's
Mhm.
one piece. The other, like, I'll give you some numbers. I looked up the last job posting we put up, and don't get me wrong, it was up for like 2 months probably, so a little longer than normally it would be up for. But I was just coming on board a replicant and all that.
Mhm.
It had 627 applicants. 627. I can't look through that
Yeah.
many CVs. My poor
No,
recruiting
I
team.
mean, it would take you like
CVs.
another 2 months.
Yeah, like that would be like three full-time jobs on top of the full-time job I have. So
Yeah.
you have to find a way. And that's where I mentioned if you are currently, if you were laid off and you have a manager you can go back to and ask them for a referral. Like I know that I got a great candidate that way. That was a huge one. There was also a few other ways that kind of came around. In my previous role, somebody sent me a video on LinkedIn. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, if you're going to be selling something, might as well sell yourself through LinkedIn. Oh no, have we lost you again, Adriana?
Oh, no.
Hmm.
Am I not showing up?
Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's on my end.
Okay. I was like,
Your
"What is
camera
going
looks like
on?"
it's having a hard time.
Hmm.
But if you see yourself, then maybe it's me. All right, Sephora,
Yeah.
then
I can
that's
see
on me.
myself on LinkedIn too, so I don't know. I think AirMe
Uh,
is just being a little weird today.
yeah,
It's
let's blame
always
my internet.
something.
Blame my internet. Yeah, so I think that, like sent me a video I thought was great. I had somebody else I hired sent me a great LinkedIn message talking about some of their struggles and their challenges of getting into the industry, and they sold their value to me. And I like that's the part that I don't want to say struggling with, because I think LinkedIn is great
Mhm.
with helping folks, you know, find that approach. They can go and be a BDR when it comes to getting hired. Pull
Yeah.
out your list of account companies you want to work with, treat that as your target account list. Go find contacts, send them messages. But I got too many messages that said, "Hi Chris, I saw you're hiring. Can we chat?" And again, out of those 627 applicants, like 30 something people asked me for coffee chats. I'm like, that's a heck of a lot of time spent just
Mhm.
having chats with people. So you've got to be able to jump in and really sell your value as a human being, because there are so many wonderful, wonderful candidates that ended up hiring because they were able to, in like a 2 minute or less video, tell me why I should hire them. And then
So
they get the coffee chat.
yeah. So I see exactly what you're saying. Like a lot of people are just sending out, these more like generic messages. And it's great that they took the step to reach out. But, if you're getting dozens of those messages, like no one really stands out. And it's kind of hard to like differentiate between candidates. So if you posted a job and someone's interested, like what should that person be sending? Should they send a video? Should they still send a voice note? Like I mean, that's advice I've given too. But like really specifically, like what should they be talking about?
Totally. So I er, voice notes, I have a love-hate relationship with, and I will tell you why. And this is a bit of a digression, but I think it's relevant. They do exactly what they are supposed to do,
Mm,
because I can't be in a Zoom call. I can't be working and like pop open a message and take a peek at it and see what it is.
mm,
It's a voice note. I have to stop what I am doing to listen to it, which is
yeah.
exactly what it wants you to accomplish. Like, right? That's what it wants you to do. But there is a chance I forget to do that for like 3 days. So it
Yeah.
might get missed. Just that's my 2 cents about voice notes. But I do think they're great in building familiarity.
Mm,
I like video. I don't know who you are. I get to see a move. I'm a fan.
yeah.
Also, for me, shows that you're willing and comfortable to try new things and try different things, and that's a really big part of the BDR role for me. So that's
Mhm,
important. If you're trying to offer, I'll give you an example. Somebody who really stood out to me that I ended up hiring in my previous role, and I use him as an example all the time, but I loved it. Great video, like under 2 minutes, lots of energy, told a great story. He had zero experience. He had gone through one of the like BDR boot camps or something like
mhm,
that. So he's like, yeah, I got that. But more importantly, he worked at the Cheesecake Factory in Canada, and there's exactly
mhm.
one of them. So they get
Oh.
like lineups out the door to get inside.
Mhm,
So it's like, so everybody I was serving at the Cheesecake Factory, I knew that they had been in line, they'd been waiting for weeks for their reservation, whatever it was. So I took it upon myself to create a great experience for them. I wanted it to be memorable. They showed up. This
mhm.
is what I owed them. And so for me, that mentality, because he translated that into, I want to do the same thing for prospects. I don't want
Yeah.
to just cold call them or cold email them. I want to create an experience that builds and so that they get value. And for me, being able to show like, hey, I don't even have BDR experience, but this is the experience I do have. And here's why I think it would be relevant.
Mhm.
Like that is super, super important to me, because I think that fits into the values that I look for in a candidate so much. The other one that I really liked was somebody talking about overcoming adversity, some like issues they had learning, going through school, all of that sort of
Mhm.
stuff, and how they overcame them. Like, again, talking about adversity, like, isn't that the biggest challenge you face a lot of time in the BDR role? People shutting you down, people hanging up on you. Like you cold call 100 people in a week and nobody wants to talk to you? Like, that's rough. How do you overcome that? Right?
Of course. So we did get a message from Sephora Stewart who said, on the topic of sending a message to the hiring manager, do you recommend connect and send a note or sending an in-mail? I find that in-mail gets lost, but curious to know which approach you prefer. Tell us about that.
Interesting. I tend to agree. In-mails get lost. LinkedIn has recently added that like second. You've got your
Mhm.
focus messages and then your other messages, and I think that in-mails get lost in there a lot. They don't always come through. When I
Yeah.
see an in-mail, I also assume it's somebody trying to sell me something. So I'm like, less inclined to click on it. I know I'm a BDR manager who like doesn't always love being solicited, so sue me.
I think
I,
the distinction is very important here that because I get a lot of in-mails too. They're usually not even related. It's like, "Oh, hey, like, are you a dermatologist who's looking to improve your client experience?" And I'm like, "No, like, you would know that." So I don't feel too bad about ignoring those.
this is another tangent, and I probably shouldn't say it since we are like live on LinkedIn.
Oh my
But I don't know if
gosh.
you've gotten any of the LinkedIn in mails. They are the worst flipping in mails I have ever seen, and it's coming from LinkedIn. So
It'll be like 8 paragraphs too. I'm like, I'm sorry, LinkedIn. Like, I'm not gonna read those. It's okay. They're fine. They don't need me to read it, honestly.
yes.
Force
Okay, so sorry.
admitted, so no
To,
in-mail. LOL.
yeah, so for us to get back to your comment, I would connect and send a note, but like the note in connection requests needs to be super short.
Mhm.
And like I would almost just say like connect in that connection note, just say like, hey, I applied for your BDR role. Like I would leave it at that. Because if
Mm,
again, you in that note act, and this applies to sales connections as well. Like if in that note I feel like you're gonna try calling me, emailing me, or get some time on my calendar, I'm like less hesitant to engage with you.
yeah.
Connect and just no CTA, just super loose, like, hey, I applied for the job. I
Mhm.
accept. That's when you go with a note. That's when you go with your video or whatever. Or if you can get really creative and find some of those good like free trials and things online, you can find my
Mhm.
email address, email me, like email me. Why the heck not? I think that's something too. When I see something like that come in,
Mhm.
I got one not that long ago titled like your next BDR or something like that. I was like,
Mm.
I gotta open
Yeah.
it. I gotta take a look.
Of course. I will also say, like, if you are an SDR or you wanna be one, like, connect with other SDRs because anytime that, like, one of my friends has been job searching but isn't in a role right now, like, if they ask me, like, "Hey, can you look up this hiring manager's phone number, so that way I can give them a call?" Like, I will always send them that. So you can also, like, just use your network to, like, find that information, even if you don't have a direct referral.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
just throwing that tip out
Absolutely.
there.
But no, that's spot on, right? And that's where I come back to like the LinkedIn, the social selling, like
Mhm.
get into the space you want to be in.
Yeah.
And I'm going to relate this back to selling again because this was relevant to me when I started, and I think it still is.
Mhm.
If I'm going to, and like currently we're in the contact center automation world, we're in the contact center world. I've lived that world and sold to that world a little while back, but
Mhm.
I want to be surrounded by those folks because I want to understand their reality. I want to understand their day to day. I want to understand their challenges. I want to understand what they're going through. And the same thing applies when you want a job especially in a newer space, or like you were
Yeah.
saying, Adriana, before, you're a bit more junior, like talk to other people, ask around, understand where they're at and how you can leverage some of those relationships to get you an introduction. Or yeah,
Mhm.
worst case, hey, you have access to Zoom info, right? Can you look this
Yeah.
guy up and find me his phone number? I'm going to cold call him and get a job.
Yeah, of course, and I feel like other SDRs are so supportive, of other sales reps because it's like, oh my god, I mean, we all know we know the struggle. So it's like, even if you haven't, like, really closely developed those relationships, like, even if you're just reaching out to other people who, like, are posting about being an SDR or anything, like, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna be totally open to helping you.
And like this is for like the cheap win you're trying to get in that short
Mhm.
span. Like a, a little compliment goes a long way.
Yeah.
If I send you a note, I'm like, hey, Jenna, I've been following you on LinkedIn for the last little while. I love your content. I'm trying to break
Mhm.
into the business. Can you give me a hand with this?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
they're- I don't get that many messages that say, hey, Chris, I love your content. But when I do get them, I'm like, damn, I like you.
Me. Thank you.
Right?
For sure. Okay, so I kind of want to revisit just LinkedIn in general. Like, when you say that like job seekers should be leveraging LinkedIn, that like they should be posting on LinkedIn, like if you're not in a role right now, or even if you were like previously an SDR and you're laid off, and you're kind of like in between things, what should people be posting about? Like, should people make an announcement that they're open to work? What are your thoughts on the open to work banner? Like, what should people be doing with their profile?
I I love this question. I appreciate you asking it, and I might end up on a bit of a tangent, so feel free to reel me in if I do end up there. First of all, the banner, like, put that. I don't know if I can swear on here, but like, put
I
that
think
S
you're
word up. I
okay.
can. Okay, put
Yeah.
that shit up. Like, come on. Why would you not put anything and everything in your favor to try and get that job? And now
Mm,
here's my 2 cents about anybody who's going to, I don't want to say discriminate because there's real discrimination going on, and that's a whole lot more serious than looking at
yeah.
somebody's green banner and being like, man, I don't want to hire them. But if they think that about you, you don't want to work there. This is what I find so
Absolutely.
interesting about a lot of conversations on LinkedIn. It's like, well, they did this and they did that. Like, cool, great, bye. Like, I know you want a job and I know you want to work, but you don't want to work there. I promise.
Yeah,
Um,
of
so
course.
put the banner
I mean,
up.
there are just some shitty companies out there. So best if they just let you know in advance and then you can skip them.
Totally. And like, there are some shitty companies. There are some shitty managers. Shitty managers sometimes work at good companies. Shitty
Mhm.
companies sometimes have great managers. Like,
Yeah.
there's a whole lot that goes on in that space. So don't get too judgy about it, but don't feel bad if somebody looks at your green banner and goes, "Yeah, I'm out of here." Like, cool.
Yeah.
See you later. Um, to posting on LinkedIn, I definitely think you should say, "Hey, I'm looking for a BDR job." Now, the thing about that is if you just show up on LinkedIn and you go, "Hey everybody, I'm looking for a BDR job." Guess what happens? Nobody sees it. So I would recommend you start building up a little bit of an audience first, and it doesn't
Mhm.
need to be anything huge. We're not talking tens of thousands of followers, but I would post a little bit. I would build a bit of a reputation. I would try and engage with folks. Honestly,
Mhm.
more so than posting. Actually, don't even care if you don't want to post. Go find other people in the space, Adriana. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, find other BDRs, find BDR managers, find anybody in the space. Go comment on their stuff.
Mhm.
That would be where I
Absolutely.
would.
Yeah, and even, like, back when I was job searching at the very start, for my first role, like, I would comment on people's posts, and sometimes I would just put, like, "PS, I'm looking for a role." Like, if you know of any, let me know. Like, not I wouldn't that wouldn't be the only thing that I would comment. Like, I would always make sure to, like, add something of value to their post and not just be, like, spamming that I'm, hireable, like, everywhere on LinkedIn. But it's like people read the comments, and I think you would be, like, really surprised to know, like, how many people will reach out, when they see things like that, especially on people's posts who do like get a lot of engagement. And if you can turn on post notifications and be like one of those first comments that are there, that can do a lot of good for sure.
And you're talking about like post notifications and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It doesn't. You don't need to be commenting on people with 50,000 followers,
Yeah.
because you don't always get engagement from them. And like
Mhm.
I'll put myself out there, and I don't have a giant following by any means, but if somebody comments on a post, like I'm going to respond to you.
Yeah.
Unless I get crazy busy or something goes down, I will respond to you. And if you are trying to get hired, well, we have a two-way conversation going now. And if you
Mhm.
threw in PS, I'm looking for a job, I'm likely to reply like, hey, let me know if there's anything I could do to help.
Yeah.
Then you send me a DM being like, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Can you help me out? Can you coach me? Can you give me some tips? Can you
Mhm.
whatever? I'm like, if I have the time, yeah, I will. But again, it creates that opening, right? I can't, if you
Mhm.
comment on my post and then send me a connection request, I'm going to accept it.
Yeah.
So you're
Absolutely, of
one step
course.
closer.
Awesome. Alrighty. So I do want to make sure that we cover a little bit more about like what outreach means, even just past like LinkedIn messages. I know we kind of went over cold calling, but in terms of like following up about applications, following up about booked interviews, things like that, like how often should people be following up? Let's say they apply, you reach out to them about the role, and you're like, hey, your resume looks awesome. Let's chat. I have an interview spot available tomorrow. You guys go through the first interview. How do you, one, close that interview? And then two, like, what should the candidate be following up with afterward?
Cool. So, closing the interview, I was like, I've been slowly like dabbling in watching TikToks and things about like job searching and BDRs and all that stuff. And
Mhm.
somebody said they hated this question and like ran through the reasons why. And I totally disagree. So I'm not sure if this is accepted as a good way to end a conversation, but I believe it
Mhm.
is. I would always ask, and I do when I interview,
Yeah.
based on this interview, based on my experience, do you have any hesitations for me, moving forward in this interview process or to get into the role, however you want to frame it? But basically just ask, like, is there any reason you wouldn't hire me based on what
Mhm.
we've just talked about?
Yeah.
And for me, two things. One, hopefully they go, no, that was a bomb interview. And like, I would love to continue moving forward with you. And you're leaving there knowing, hey, I've got something to look forward to.
Mhm.
B, I come back and I go, hey, that sucked. I'm not going to move forward with you. And again, I know it's very unlikely to happen. You're probably going to be living in the, hey, that went well, or hey, I do really like your experience and I am interested in moving forward. I maybe have a hesitation or two.
Mhm. I
And
absolutely love that question. And, like, I know that, like, in a lot of my interviews, people, at least the first time around, would be like, "Oh, this has been a great interview. Like, we would love you as a candidate, but I'm just concerned about your lack of sales experience." And like, I would have already explained that like my property management experience was sales experience and why. But I think a lot of times, like people, one, maybe they just like kind of missed it in the conversation. And then two, like I think a lot of times people just want to like understand how you are going to respond to something like that. Um, one, because like as a salesperson, like you deal with a lot of objections, but then two, just to like kind of get a little bit more of an understanding of like, do you know the value of your skills, of your previous experience and what you're bringing to the table? And that kind of lets you like, okay, I hear you. However, like I do have this experience, or, that's not something that you need to be worried about. And here's why.
and I always like the approach. So you've got this balance as well, right? So you
Mhm.
can ask the question, you get the feedback, you come back like you were saying and go, oh, well, I think that this experience is salesy
Mhm.
enough. And you're trying to kind of ring that back and say, hey, we did talk about this. Here it is. What I like to do is go into discovery mode. I
Mhm.
want to show off my sales skills. So, Adriana, I get where you're coming from. I don't have sales experience like
Yeah.
straight up on paper. Can you walk me through what skills specifically you're looking for? Or
Mhm.
in your example, you talked about your property management. Do you think my property management skills have crossover into what you're looking for?
Mhm. I love that,
So
asking a question back. That is
my
awesome.
favorite interviews are ones where they can completely derail me and own the conversation,
Mhm.
because that's one of the things I work on teaching more junior sales folks, right?
Yeah.
Is you get that initial like cold call and then somebody just starts peppering you with questions, right? It's like, hey, it's Chris from Replicant. Oh, what the heck's Replicant? Oh, what do you do?
Mhm.
Who are your customers? And they go on and on. And having
Yeah.
that skill to turn the conversation around is really meaningful. So if you can do that at the end of the interview, I'm like, dude, you asked a great question and now you're owning that question and really
Mhm.
putting my feet to the fire, like bonus points for sure.
That is awesome. Carolyn, we are going to get to her question next. But I did just want to go over like after the interview, let's say you have had a first interview, that person was like, yeah, we totally want to bring you back in. But, I have to talk to my VP of sales, see when she is available, and I'll get back to you with like a date. And maybe like a day or two goes by, like you haven't heard anything. At what point should you be following up? And how should people be following up?
So, two comments to that. First one, before you get out of the interview, like always ask for next steps as well, right? So,
Mhm.
hey, I'm gonna chat with my VP of sales. No problem. Sounds great. When do you think I should expect to hear back? Oh, I'll probably get back to you by the end of the week.
Mhm.
Fantastic. If I haven't heard back from you by Friday, do you mind if I reach back out to you on Monday?
Mhm.
Sales, like sales 101 stuff, right? But just come back and like, I don't feel bad reaching out to you because I told you I'm going to reach out. And then on
Yeah.
Monday, you haven't heard back, give them a call, send them an email. I think that's one great way of approaching it. If you haven't done that, I would still assume like 2 to 3 days. Let's say 3 days go by, two to
Mhm.
three days go by, and you can reach back out. You can also reach out. This again, sales and recruiting or sales and getting
Yeah.
hired, same thing. Multi-thread within the account. I know it sounds
Mhm.
silly, but after that interview, I'm writing you a thank you email. There were other people in the interview. Hey,
Yeah.
Adriana, can you send me Chris's email? I would love to send him a thank you note. I've
Mhm.
got the recruiter's email that helped me set up this interview. Now I can reach out to like 4 different people and ask them
Mhm.
what's going on, right? So
Absolutely.
you're just creating more opportunity for yourself. And the number one thing I would recommend, and this goes back to like we're coming full circle, get with them on LinkedIn. If you can
Mhm.
do that, you can have such a more casual conversation. Again, wonderful candidate that I interviewed, and I'm just waiting to dot I's and cross T's on offers. I get a meme from her today.
Nice.
I sent her back a note being like, "This is awesome." So like, she's top of mind. If I
Mhm.
owed her feedback, you better believe she's getting her feedback.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn is great because you get a more casual interaction versus I feel like when you're sending an email, it's a little more official. It's a little bit more stuffy, like,
Mhm.
"Hi, Adriana, it's been 3 days since we have interviewed. I thought the interview went well," and blah, blah, blah. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay. But if you can have some fun with it, like next level stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Caroline, I think it's Carolyn, sent in a question. She said, I have sales experience with all the pipeline and research, but haven't done SDR work. However, I am over 50, and we all know there is ageism. Yes, we do. I get it, and I'm not worried about it. However, just wondering if you have tips for breaking into the biz if needed for someone over the age of 50. Thoughts on this?
Ooh, that is a good one. That is a good one. And I wish I could say I have like a silver bullet that will help you out, Caroline, CJ. We'll go CJ. Um, I think a lot of it. So I have two schools of thought. I'm not the most formal person. I'm pretty upfront and pretty casual about a lot of things. I would consider owning it. Like get into a meeting, get into your interview and be like, "Hey, I know that you might think that I'm over 50 and, might not be as interested as somebody else. Like, I get that. But
Mhm.
here's why my years of experience are relevant." So I wouldn't be opposed to you jumping in and just like putting it up front, take it right off the table. Um, Finding a nice creative way to do that where you're not like, "Hey, I hope you're not ageist," because like I'm older
Yeah.
than most candidates. But I think that's a way to do it. Otherwise, I would just be very formulaic with your experience and be able to really show and leverage how that's going to make your hiring, onboarding, and ramp period
Mhm.
easier.
Yeah.
I I don't know if the ageism piece is like, hey, I don't want to hire somebody older. They won't fit in with the team, or they're going to be harder to train, or they're, not going to pick it up, or technology, or like, I don't know exactly what it is. But if you can make it seem as easy as possible for them, I think that is going to definitely be able to help kind of move that forward. So I would just own it and then try and be very clear with like, I've worked with this technology before. I have
Mhm.
done this type of work before. I understand that this is something that would be helpful in this current role.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just a side note to that, Jerry in chat was talking about Sandy Summer, who is somebody I chatted with and is a lovely gentleman. So, Carolyn, highly recommend you reach out to him. Side note. Sorry, go on.
awesome. I'm just gonna pop this in AirMeet so that way she can see it,
Oh
since she
yes.
sent it through here. Awesome. Okay, yeah, I do have some thoughts on this, mainly because I have talked to a lot of recruiters and I've kind of like been able to see more of the like from the side of things of like companies, talking to like boot camps and stuff about their candidates. And I've heard this easily like a dozen times where like companies don't want to hire people who are like over 30 because they do feel like they're going to be harder to train or like not technology savvy. Whatever. It's all BS. Honestly, it's like the same thing of companies not wanting to hire people who are like too young, because they like won't know how to operate in a workplace or something. Like it's all ridiculous. And I absolutely hate that this is even like something that we have to like talk about. However, like I think that a really good way to get around that, which is something that you did kind of already mention, is like, okay, make sure that you're making it really clear. One, like, I've worked with Salesforce, I've worked with HubSpot. Like, even if you haven't worked like with those tools in previous roles, that you like do some kind of training program or whatever. And that's the same advice that I would give to someone who like is very young and who has never been in tech before, is just that like anything that you can do to kind of like get in front of those concerns and show that, like, I've done the research on this role. I'm coming in with valuable experience, whatever that may be, and that, like, I've already taken steps to make sure that I at least generally, know what I would need to use in order to be successful. I think that can be like a really good way around it too, for sure. But honestly, that totally sucks. I think it also comes back to the like, you know, if a company like has that feeling, like, do you really want to work there in the first place? And I feel like there are enough companies who are not like that, where it's like, especially with a lot of, pushes in like more recent years to like have more diverse teams and have more people of like different ages and backgrounds and all of that. That it's not really so much of a blocker anymore, hopefully.
Yeah,
But
I think that to your point, companies will find a way to say you're too old, you're too young, you're too female, you're too male, you're too close
mhm,
to pregnancy age, you're too like, and it's a real thing regardless of not regardless. There's just so many scenarios you have to be careful
yeah.
of, which is shitty that we have to talk about it at all. Like that's the frustrating part to me, but it is reality, it's still reality, and I hope it won't be for too much longer. But
Yeah.
like I said, I wish I had an answer for it, and I wish I had a silver bullet of some sort to use. But I think, like to Jerry's point in the LinkedIn chat, being able to connect with other folks who have overcome that, I think, will be helpful,
Mhm.
and help give you that sort of some tools to use. I'll also add in the same one that I talked to about everybody, like build your brand on LinkedIn, get out there,
Yeah.
network with people, connect with people. You're gonna get a better chance if you can get referred, if people see your face, if people engage with you. So like
Mhm.
it's worth a shot, right?
Absolutely. Awesome. So I do want to go through a little bit of like how the hiring process, what that looks like from more of like a manager leadership perspective, like what goes on your end with recruitment, like with candidates. What does that process kind of look like from start to finish?
Totally. So for me, our interview process, I am a big fan of making it as simple as possible. I think in general, the BDR role is more towards the entry level side of things. I don't think you should go through 14 different interviews to get hired. Based on the volume, I do work with my recruiting partner who will do a first phone screen, 15 some
Mhm.
odd minutes, just to check like the basics. Hey, your salary expectations kind of line up with where we're at. You're not asking for 3 times more than what our salary offering would be. Where you work in, you live in a city that we're able to hire you in, or a state you're able to hire you in, stuff like that. Just general, like, hey, why do you want to work at Replicant? Why do you enjoy sales? Like very basic stuff. And if you took 5 minutes to prepare for that, you can say what Replicant does, and you communicate reasonably well. You'll get through that probably pretty
Mhm.
easily. Second step is with me. You've probably got about 45 minutes to put up with me. I like to ask questions that tie more towards, I almost want to say like life skills and characteristics. Like I'm big on wanting to understand if you've had to overcome challenges, if you've worked in sales and missed quota before, why, what kind of tweaks did you make, what did you learn from it, your ability, if you don't have too much sales experience, like can we talk about projects where you had to sell an idea to teammates? Can we talk about a previous role where you had to sell an idea to a leader or something like that? So like those are all kind of things that I would look for in that.
Mhm.
And then the last step would be a project, which I know is much maligned out there because I don't like asking people to do free work, to be fair. But I
Yeah.
have not found a better way to get a grasp on some of their basic sales skills than by asking them to do a little project. And I try and highlight this shouldn't take you more than an hour. If it does, like you're probably overthinking it, or I'm a jerk and
Mhm.
have given you too much work. We'll give them
Verdict's
an
still
account,
out on that one.
right?
I get.
We'll give them an account and a prospect at that account. The goal is for them to come up with what they think would be a good outreach sequence
Mhm.
for that. And again, like I'm not expecting folks to be a pro BDR, pro SDR, whatever.
Yeah.
I want to know that you can research. So like, hey, if I come back and I can tell you the company's initiatives are ABC, it's tied around contact center or customer service because that's the space we play in, great. this individual, what are kind of some nuggets that you can use to leverage to create some sort of outreach to them. And then just something together that, again, it doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be well thought out. I want to understand the reasoning behind it. I would call them first and then send them an email, because if I were to leave a voicemail, I tell them, go check that email. Cool. What's in the email? Oh, I would send them a little bit of information about XYZ, because that's what's important to that company. Great. That's what I'm looking for. I would usually do that with myself. I love having one of the BDRs on that call as well. So sort of a panel interview. And then somebody else, sometimes in my past history, it's been within enablement. Sometimes it's somebody else from like marketing or sales or whatever. So we try and give them a little bit of a varied view of the company as well. I still want to make sure in that interview they're able to ask questions, and having a BDR there for me is super relevant, because I can answer a bunch of questions, but I think the BDR who's living in the weeds every day can give much better answers. The other reason, from a hiring perspective or a hiring manager perspective, I have that BDR on that interview is we get off afterwards, right? The three of us on the panel will talk about the candidate. If that BDR goes, hey, I like this person, I want them to be a part of the team, perfect. You just vouch for them. You now own the fact that they need to be successful here. And if they don't, it's on you.
Gotcha.
But there's some play in there, right? like, hey,
Yeah.
I vouch. I said they'd be good. I think they'd be a good fit. I think they can do the job. I'm going to go maybe out of my way a little bit to make sure that the training and development is going well. I'm going to make sure that they're ramping up quickly. I'm going to make sure that that extra love is there. And I think including them in the decision helps kind of spread out some of that responsibility instead of it just being strictly on me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we are going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, around maybe like 2:50-ish. So if you guys have any like last minute questions, please put them in the chat so we can get to them now. I know that I got a question beforehand just about interview answers and like, what are you looking for as a manager, especially with questions like, tell me about yourself, or, what's a time that you faced a lot of rejection, like these sort of more like theoretical, nebulous questions that people aren't really sure how to answer.
Yeah, tell me about yourself. To be fair, the thing I'm probably looking for the most is your ability to deliver a concise message. If I ask you to tell me about yourself and you take 20 minutes of the interview introducing yourself, we're going to have a problem. I would love for you to run through kind of what you asked me at the beginning, right? Like, hey, tell me a bit about your work experience. Tell me a bit about your personal, who you are, and why you want to do whatever it is I'm interviewing you for. So I'm just looking for somebody who can be a good communicator, keep it concise, and just give me a quick rundown of like who you are. And half the time, if those interviews are going well, they'll bring something up and be like, oh, that's so cool. I love this. Let's chat more about, I don't know, Marvel movies or something. And we end up on some tangent, but you're building a relationship there. So that's one that I like. When it comes to like facing a lot of rejection, I hate that question because it's so manufactured. Like, I know what the answer is supposed to be. I know I'm supposed to tell you I faced a lot of rejection and then I dusted it off and I picked myself back up and I crushed it. Like, why would I ask you that question? You know what the answer is before I ask it.
I think I've gotten that question in every single SDR interview I've ever had. I cannot remember a single time that I did not get it.
But I would much rather ask you, tell me about a time where you were working on a project and you failed to deliver on time. Tell me about a time you had, I love the question about, hey, selling an idea to somebody, because what happens if that didn't go well?
Yeah.
Well, how'd you pick yourself back up? Right. So like, I would rather ask a question about that where somebody can tell me a story than just like, yeah, shucks, got shut down a bunch, but I'm all good.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, so we have one last question that we're going to answer. Also from Sephora. She said, any good questions to ask the hiring manager to make sure you aren't being bamboozled or taken advantage of by a company, especially being new to the space? That is a great question.
Yes. And Sephora, I will give you bonus points for using the term bamboozled. Well
Yes.
done. I know this isn't exactly the same in a BDR space versus an AE space, but oh my gosh, I am blanking on the gentleman's name and it's going to kill me now. The RepView guy, Ryan Walsh.
Oh, yes.
Ryan Walsh. I would suggest following him. He is really great at highlighting some of those things, because the bamboozle aspect, I would want to know what the expectations are, right? Like what are the BDRs expected to do? How many of them are hitting that number?
Yeah.
What are the territories like? Am I going to get 3 states, or am I going to get, the tip of the island of New York or of Manhattan or whatever it is? So I would ask some of those questions around like, what is that going to look like? How many AEs am I going to support? Like I've interviewed people who support 7 AEs and it's ludicrous. So like some of those questions are good. I would check out Ryan Walsh's stuff because he also,
Mhm.
a lot of his posts talks about like how to ask that question in a respectful but challenging way as well. Because I think some of that has to do with it. Something he recommends a lot that I've never had the balls to ask, but I think is worth asking is like, can I talk to somebody who works there? Can I talk to a BDR like without you on the call, Chris? I don't want to talk to you in a BDR. Just straight up BDR to
Yeah.
BDR. What are they going to tell me?
I also love just like going to people who may have like very recently left the company, especially if they were in the role that you're wanting, and doubly especially if they went, for example, from like BDR, which you're applying to AE and then left. Because to be able to actually talk to someone who, and it's not that people who currently work at companies are going to like completely lie to you every time or anything like that, but it's like, if you work somewhere, like you're not necessarily going to want to come across like you're like, talking shit about your boss either, so I think that people are like generally more careful about like what they're willing to say for their current company versus like somewhere that they used to work. So it's like if you can reach out to someone who's done your role, who's seen what the actual career progression is like, who's seen like what everything looks like from more of a like holistic sense, I think that's like the best person that you can talk to, where you'll get like a pretty honest answer most of the time.
And I think that's a great call out because I think the type of questions you ask somebody who still works there versus somebody who doesn't are
Yeah,
different.
for sure.
If I'm talking to somebody who still works there, I'm validating what I asked the manager. So if
Hmm.
they ask me how many of the BDRs hit quota, and I say like 70% of them, and then they
Hmm.
ask the BDR that works there, and he's like, yeah, like 50% of us, or
Yeah,
yeah, I support 4
30.
AEs, or yeah, I was being
Yeah.
generous, but yeah, like I would ask validating questions
Mhm.
more than I would necessarily ask, like, what's it like to work there? Oh, this place is
Yeah.
shit. Go run. Like, no, I work here. Um, but yeah, I think there's an aspect to it that you just want to validate the right things if you're talking to somebody who works there. And if you're not, yeah,
Yeah,
unfiltered. Go for it.
for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining me today. It has been super fun. If someone is watching and they maybe have a question for you as a manager, can they reach out on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. I
Awesome.
will give two statements before I take off. And first of all, Adriana, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been an
Of
absolute blast. I'm
course.
looking for an excuse to talk to you anyway, so this just turned out to be perfect. Yes, if you have any questions, like hit me up. I can't always carve out time to chat, but like Sephora is actually one who sent me a message on LinkedIn. We had a great chat
Mhm.
the other day about like breaking into the industry. So I'm totally open to it when I have the time. The second thing, because I am so passionate about folks building their brand and posting on LinkedIn. If you post anything on LinkedIn and you're like, is anybody actually going to read this? Tag me in the comments. I will read it and I promise I will reply. So, worst case scenario, one person will see your post and you'll get at least one comment guaranteed. So
Well, and if
that's my
you
one.
comment on it, it'll probably come up on my feed, and then I'll also comment on it. So
Perfect.
perfect.
They tag
The
me,
circle of
I'll tag
LinkedIn.
you. Done. Two people
Awesome.
will read all of your posts guaranteed.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, perfect. So thank you again. Thank you for anyone who's watching. If you were watching and you do want to join an awesome community of sales and marketing and a whole bunch of other people who all work in tech, check out revgenius.com or revgenius.com/events to see all of the other free upcoming events that we have. But we will see you guys on the next live stream. Thank you so much for watching.